I hadn't seen my mum since 2018, so when I was 18, and they told me that my mum was losing her battle with alcohol dependency and she had stage 4 liver disease, and spent basically 10 minutes with her before she fell unconscious.
Traits of active addiction within anybody can spread to the family. So this idea that you're having to go to school and sort of put a mask on and pretend sort of mimics the action of the addiction.
I had this constant feeling that like everybody else wasn't happy either, so you just have to make them happy, agreeing to things I didn't want to do, or being friends with people that probably weren't good for me at the time, or relationships. You know, into university, I was dating people who had alcohol dependencies because I thought that that was normal and that I could help them. And in later life as well, I have major anxiety. I have had my own doubts of obviously depression and things like that, and I've had to deal with those. I did not have a healthy relationship with alcohol at all. And I think, again, that's down to learned behaviour. I very much thought that alcohol was the need and end for every celebration, but it meant that I had no idea that I was supposed to have a limit and would just get blackout drunk. And I wasn't a very nice drunk. I was either incredibly emotional and just crying, or was just really horrible. I didn't like that version of me in any aspect, but I thought it was very normal. When I went to go see mum, it basically switched in my head that this is a poison. Why was I ever touching this in the first place? Would never touch it. I couldn't touch it again.
Welcome to School of Rock Bottom with Oliver Mason. I'm an actor, a voiceover artist and a recovery coach who's been in recovery many years, and I know firsthand that rock bottom can be the greatest teacher and the springboard for a beautiful life. And as you know, I interview fellow creatives and all inspiring people that have hit rock bottom, survived and thrived. This is a podcast of hope and how to get out of the darkness into the light, and that's why I'm so excited today, because I've got the sensational Sammy Kingston in the studio.
Hello, thank you for having me. Sensational, that's nice.
You are sensational. So nice to see you. It's been a few years.
It has been a few years, but it's wonderful to see you.
Yeah, it's really, really great to see you. Thank you so much for coming down. Pleasure. If you don't know who Sammy is, shame on you, but you will do now. Here's a quick bio. So Sammy Kingston is the co-founder of Virtual Umbrella, working within the immersive technology industry. Samantha has been raising awareness around the impacts of alcohol and sharing her story of being a COA, child of an alcoholic, since 2018 after her mum passed away. Samantha is a community champion for Alcohol Change UK. Samantha created a VR film in 2019 which premiered at the Raindance Film Festival called Anonymous, which is an autobiographical about growing up as a COA. In 2022, Samantha talked about her film and her experiences on the TEDx stage, and the link to that and everything else about Sammy is in the show notes. What we're going to be talking today, unfortunately, is all too common, with a stat that Sammy mentions on her brilliant TED Talk, that 1 in 5 people are affected by their parents drinking. So this conversation is going to help so many people. We're going to start, Sammy, as I always do with every podcast, and ask you to take us back to a rock bottom moment of your choosing. And from there, we're going to expand into the light and the joy and the recovery.
Sounds good. Let's focus towards the light, because that makes everything feel better. So, rock bottom moment. Let's think. So, we'll go back to 2018, as I mentioned in the bio. So, it's actually towards the end of September of 2018. I just turned 28. I had the most epic birthday party, and it was Jeff Goldblum themed. So obviously I dressed up in the Jurassic Park themed of Jeff Goldblum, because you have to. And I remember waking up the day after my birthday party thinking, I'm really happy. I've had the best time. Everything feels great right now. And it was one of those things, you know, when you look back at a picture and you look at a moment in time, you're like, oh, I'm so happy. Everything's good. Like, work's good, life's good, partner's good, family's good. Everything feels great. And next thing I know, I get a message from one of my relatives in Scotland. And it says, Sammy, mum's in hospital. And I'm like, okay, here we go again. Because in the 10 years previous to this message coming through, I'd had a few messages over the years saying, mum's unwell, mum's this, something's gone wrong with mum. And I kind of sort of took it with a pinch of salt and was like, oh, it's just another thing. It's just another thing. And it wasn't another thing. And I had a phone call, a couple of conversations, and I was basically told to get on a plane and get to Scotland as quickly as possible. I had a conversation with a doctor just before I got on a plane, and they told me that my mum was basically losing her battle with alcohol dependency, and she had stage 4 liver disease. And that is basically, you can't come back from stage 4 liver disease. So got on a plane, landed in Edinburgh, got in a taxi, got to the hospital, and spent basically 10 minutes with her before she fell unconscious. And you think, I hadn't seen my mum since 2018, so when I was 18, and all of that anger and thoughts and emotions all had to kind of come down into a very short amount of time. And I'll be forever grateful to my dad for saying, forget that, just go and have a conversation with your mum, because you don't know how long you're going to get. And I had 10 minutes with her. That's all I got.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that, Sammy. It's very, very powerful. Highly personal question, which you can skip. What did you say to her in those 10 minutes?
I said, hi, Mum. And she looked at me with kind of like very large eyes, like, oh no, here's the older daughter coming to tell me off. Right. But yeah, I said hello. I said, hi, Mum. She told me that she was going somewhere. She told me she had to go somewhere. Didn't know what that really meant, but probably in the high of, being on lots of drugs to kind of relax her in those final moments. But she told me she had to go. And I just said her it was fine. I said, it's absolutely fine. You do what you need to do. If you got to go, you got to go. And that was it. And then I gave her a hug and I walked out of the room. And when I came back in, she was unconscious.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, obviously that moment and the lead up to that moment has kind of shaped your journey ever since and made you the amazing human that you are, which is School of Rock Bottom right there. I don't usually do this with a lot of guests, probably a lot less than you might imagine, but I think it might be useful to go back into your childhood for a minute and just kind of look at how that was for you. Obviously I'm a little bit, we're in the same boat, but in some ways I suppose I'm on the other side of the fence, as in what I mean by that is that I've come through alcoholism and I was the person that was addicted in my life in the past, causing worry and angst for my family. But some of the things that seem to be themes with this type of situation, I'm just going to ask you about, and you can either say, yes, they apply or no, they don't, and feel free to expand or not. One thing that is quite common is a feeling of isolation as a child or as a young person.
100%. Yeah. Isolation is massive. And I think, especially when I look back, and I think, funnily enough, all these kind of memories and things have kind of started hitting me back only in the last couple of years. Because I think when I was younger, you kind of hide away from it. You don't want to talk about it. But isolation was massive because I was spending majority of my, I would say sort of age 14 upwards, going to school and then college, not telling anybody what was going on at home and feeling very alone and isolated in that situation because, again, it might be something that comes up on your list. There is the fear that is associated with isolation, that something's going to happen if I speak up. And, you're sitting in classrooms surrounded by your friends thinking, I just need to be normal in this, but going home at the end of the day thinking, gosh, I'm so alone and I can't tell anyone. Yeah. And it's so painful because all you want to do is tell everybody else or, reach out to somebody who might be able to help, but you don't know what that help is going to entail. Yeah. I think isolation must be huge. Yeah. And obviously for me, but I reckon isolation was probably massive for my mum as well, putting on the flip for her. So isolation, massive.
I think what's really interesting as well is sort of the traits of active addiction within anybody can spread to the family. So this idea that you're having to go to school and sort of put a mask on and pretend sort of mimics the action of the addiction for that person. So this idea that it's a family illness that really sort of highlights that. You're sort of doing behaviours that perhaps you wouldn't have done.
100%. And I think a lot of it when you're growing up is learnt behaviour. My thought around alcohol when I was little is very normal. I think, everyone, your parents are drinking, so I'm going to be drinking when I'm older because that's normal. But it doesn't necessarily mean that those learnt behaviours are healthy. Yeah. Because, I was, let's say 14, but I was also drinking at that age because I thought it was normal and it was accessible. If it's accessible, then you have no idea where it goes. You know, that journey could have gone many different ways for me. Luckily, it didn't. But I was very aware that it felt normal.
What age did it become a big problem for your mum in terms of your age? Do you remember how old you were when?
I think I was probably around 13, 14, I think. There was probably stuff happening previous to that. But again, I didn't associate it with a problem. Right. It was just fun mummy.
Right.
So if we were going to a family party or something, you know, mum's just had a drink. Oh, she's fine. Like, it's just normal.
Yeah.
But I think there was a change in atmosphere that I was picking up on, but again, wasn't necessarily understanding why mummy was upset or why was she not getting involved in family things anymore, or why was I having to take my brother to school? You know, there's things that, you know, now I see it in a very clear light, but it was definitely an atmosphere. Constantly felt like I was stepping on eggshells around her. Yeah. So I didn't want to annoy her in any way. I just had to do what had to be done. And if that meant, you know, making sure everybody else was okay, everything seemed normal to my younger siblings, and that's what we had to do. But it definitely was a change, like in atmosphere. You just couldn't quite pinpoint it. It's a bit like walking into a room when everyone's been talking about you and you're like, oh my gosh, it's not a nice feeling.
I think you concluded, listening to your TED talk, that maybe it's something that you'd done.
Oh yes. Yeah, 100%. You do. And I think that probably, I don't know if it's also like being like a bit of a people pleaser maybe, and thinking, gosh, I just need to make sure that she's okay because, you know, if she's going to have a bad day, then I'm going to have a bad day, and it's all going to be reflective on that. And also, like, you kind of feel like you're carrying everything. So even going into school or college or hanging out with my friends, I had this constant feeling that like everybody else wasn't happy either. So you just have to make them happy. Right. So that could be me just agreeing to things I didn't want to do, or being friends with people that probably weren't good for me at the time, or relationships, you know. I remember going into university, I was dating people who had alcohol dependencies because I thought that was normal and that I could help them in those aspects. But
wow. Yeah, that's something that's on this list, which is really, really, really interesting. It's something that I learned as well, quite young, that if I can make other people happy, then I'll be okay, which is actually a very toxic behaviour, isn't it? And 100%. Leads to people pleasing, which is really a painful process and has been part of my recovery to stop doing that. Yeah. I know it's really hard. Boundaries is something that I've got in capital letters that we're going to talk about later. Yeah. Which I imagine are really important for you. Approval seeking. I think you sort of touched on that briefly. Is that something that you did as a teenager or as an adult? Yeah, and I think, again, they all kind of wrap into themselves, don't they? But approval is, again, another big thing. And I think it's just with any aspect of my life, it's, you know, I wanted to make sure that I was doing the best, and I wanted people to see that I was good at what I was doing. It's actually kind of probably gone into my career as well, of being a business owner, is making sure I have approval and making sure that, you know, Is it because you felt your mum wasn't present, wasn't listening to you? Oh, 100%. Yeah. She was, bless her, in her own world and doing what she needed to do. You're kind of fighting for their approval. You're fighting for their attention. And you know you're not really going to get it. Yeah. I always used to kind of weirdly fantasize that when I was older, I would be a success. I would do this, I would do that. And then one day when we would be reunited, I'd be like, look what I've done. Look at all these amazing things I've achieved. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that kind of meant that I wasn't actually living for myself. Right. You're living for somebody else because you're not necessarily doing things you want to be doing yourself, which is a really weird thing to reflect on. Yes. And I assume you would then assume that those things might fix her alcoholism. Yeah, exactly. It's almost like living a life for somebody else who can't. Yeah. So, you know, when I was maybe 16, 17, she used to always say things like she never got to do this, or she never got to achieve things, or she never got to go places. So I always thought, well, if I do it, she's weirdly living via me, but it's not really the case. Right. Yeah. It's really interesting because I do a lot of work in rehabs with adults that are trying to get through an addiction and sometimes other issues as well. and talking about being abstinent and not drinking or using.
Yeah.
And I always say the first people that are going to notice that you're clean and sober are your kids.
Yeah.
They're going to look you in the eye and go, mum's back.
Yeah.
Dad's back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's such a powerful thing, because I think children in particular notice it. I think even more than partners and other family members. Children just look at mum or dad and go, oh my God, they're back.
Yeah.
And I can imagine that switch being off for so long.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, you would then go into, approval-seeking behaviours.
100%.
You talked about the kind of, and I see this with addiction in myself and with people I work with, there can be a kind of victim mentality, because it kind of facilitates more drinking.
Yeah.
It's like, if everything's going wrong, so of course I'm going to have this drink. This is a possible side effect for children of alcoholics. Is that something that you've ever had to deal with? Did you sort of take on a victim mindset ever?
I probably have. I probably wouldn't want to admit it.
Yeah, sure.
I think I probably have. And there's probably been scenarios where I've very much thrown myself into that. Yeah, I think that's something that I think a lot of people in my situation would feel is something that they need to explore. And I think I actually did explore it a little bit when I went into therapy, because I did therapy for a couple of years, which, oh my gosh, was the best thing I ever done. Loved it. Talking to, I could talk for England, but I generally loved talking to my therapist.
Yeah.
But no, I think victim, maybe that's something I need to explore a bit more, because it's not something that I have necessarily gone through and figured out. But that's a really interesting one.
If it makes you feel better, I definitely have had to work through that, because for me, I just kind of look at it as addiction's way of kind of justifying a drink or a drug.
Yeah.
Might not work exactly the same way from your perspective, but for me, it's like, I'm in self-pity, I'm making myself a victim, and this is all just a ruse so I can justify this pint. Yeah. So I can't allow it to linger for very long. Self-pity and sort of a victim mindset is something that I can only indulge briefly, because it can lead me down a path of, well, of course I'm going to have this drink. Because
exactly. I think that's a really good way of looking at it, actually. And I think maybe for me, it is that I have to be careful not to get into too many sad places. Yeah. Because although I don't drink anymore, and that's a personal choice, and that is very much catered from my mum, there is a fear of, okay, well, I've been through all of these really bad things, all of these horrible things have happened, but maybe because I'm in a horrible, sad place that I should pick up a drink again. Yeah. And that's a little bit of a worry, but it's always in the back of my head. It's a good thing my dad always says, never drink when you're sad. And I'm like, oh, I will never do that.
Your dad's right. I used to do it all the time, and it was awful. I think you're over 6 years sober, I believe. And it's something that I'm definitely going to come back to. So if you just clock that, don't worry. We're going to be celebrating that very shortly. A couple of other things. Fear of abandonment. Is that something that's been a bit of a theme for you?
Yes, huge. I felt very abandoned by my mum, to be fair. Obviously growing up with her not being present, obviously. But in the 10 years, so I basically didn't speak to her or see her for 10 years. That partly was my decision in the beginning. It was so our relationship fully broke down. But I always thought that she would come back and almost rescue me and be mum again and, jump back into my life. But it never happened. And those conversations that we did have over those 10 years were just angry-filled conversations. They weren't positive in any aspect. Right. So I always felt that she just got up and left, when I know she didn't. She had to go and do what she needed to do to be further away from me and my siblings, because my siblings needed to have unfortunately have a good life in a way to, have a positive impact at school, rebuild, their relationships with each other, with me and them as well. And it was important that mum was kind of removed from that situation. Yeah. I just always thought that she would sort of come in on her white horse and save us, but it never happened. So I think, always felt very much abandoned from her, which is a bit sad. Yeah,
well, it makes sense. What an amazing act of self-love for yourself at 18 to do that, though. As hard as it was.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of guilt must have come about whether or not I've done the right thing.
Huge. Yeah.
It's not worth a tuppence, because you've lived your life and your experience, but I absolutely agree that you did the right thing. If in close ties with people in active addiction, not seeking recovery. You've got to look after yourself, your own well-being.
Yeah, 100%. And you do have moments of guilt, and I think it will always trickle in, especially how it ended. I think you always think, oh gosh, well, if I had just been there, maybe I could have fixed it, I could have sorted it. But I know it's not down to me, really. It was down to her to get to that point, and unfortunately that's just the way that it ended. And it is a big thing that, sometimes it does still sort of wake me up at night, and I will always I will go back to the hospital. Like, I have lots of dreams and things about it where I'm like, damn it, if I'd just done that thing. But you can't live like that, unfortunately. Like, you'd have to kind of have peace with it a little bit.
Yes.
And forgive yourself in those circumstances. And also the big thing as well, I don't know about you, but when I think about mum and I think about alcohol, I have to really separate them.
Yeah.
And I know that it's, there were maybe horrible things that happened to her that made her go down that path. But ultimately, alcohol is the one thing that was changing her.
Yeah.
And I have to really make sure that I'm not, fully blaming everything on that one side. There is something that is, causing those kind of things.
Yeah.
So it's, being able to separate and go and remember the nice things, remember the good times if you can. I think that's important.
100%. Yeah, there's a couple of really powerful things there. I mean, one being that no one can really do anything. Children, I had someone with very big religious faith on recently said even God, they said, can stop addiction. People won't get sober for their kids, for their work, for their health. Some people carry on drinking even when they get a terminal diagnosis or about to, unless that person wants to find that change within themselves. And that, there's nothing you could have done.
No. It's like
it has to come from her, doesn't it?
It has to. And it's a bit like hitting your head on a brick wall, don't they say? Like, I had conversations with her before we sort of parted ways, being like, you have everything. I was like, you've got amazing kids, you've got an amazing partner, you've got this life, you've got a roof over your head, like, you've got all of these amazing things. Why can't you see it? And she just couldn't see it. And at the time I didn't understand why she couldn't see it. I get it now.
Yeah.
But it's like that. I remember just almost like trying to pour love into her and being like, look, like these incredible things. Let's stop this nonsense and then let's carry on with life.
Yeah.
But she couldn't see it. She couldn't get past that point.
Right.
And it's a very scary place to be. And
addiction without any recovery, you're just so powerless to that substance, which then makes you even more powerless because she's powerless over the substance. So why would you be able to have any power over her?
Exactly.
One analogy that I use a lot in rehab, talking about how behaviour changes, say with alcohol or drugs, is I don't know if you remember Superman 3. Which is one of my favourite. I mean, I was born in 1979, so like Superman was a hero to me. But I think it's Superman 3, where he comes in contact with kryptonite and he becomes angry. He can't walk. There's like damsels in distress. He's not going to save them. Yeah. To me, that is a story about addiction. So I often say to people, you're still Superman, you're still Superwoman, but you've got this thing called kryptonite that deems you powerless and angry, and you neglect responsibility. Yeah. So I'm sure your mum was a beautiful, wonderful person, but had her kryptonite.
100%.
That changed her. Fear of authority. That one I found interesting as a possible side effect. Yeah, and I guess that probably also comes in with like people pleasing, probably, because you do, again, you have like a fear of everything that's going on, so you personally don't want anyone to find out what's happening at home, so you do want to behave yourself, and you do want to kind of make sure that everything is being every sort of kept house, shall we say. So there is a fear of authority, and I think especially in the beginning of my career, I very much, that actually probably played a big part in the way that I sort of put myself together in terms of like the jobs I had and the way that I spoke to people and the way that I got on with things. Yeah. So I think that is a very big thing. But like with all of these things, they all kind of blend into one, don't they? Yeah, of course. And I would imagine your cortisol levels, your stress levels, particularly as a teenager must have been really high. 100%. Living in a toxic environment. Yeah. It's difficult enough being a teenager in a healthy household. 100%. That must have manifested in anxiety and
I had lots of things going on, and especially at that age when you are trying to figure things out, and especially for me, so you've got this one side at home that's all stress and that's all happening, and then you kind of got the weird sort of stress of friendships and relationships that compared to this doesn't seem like a big deal, but it is a big deal. And because that's the stuff that is almost normal. That's the stuff that is going to get you by sort of day to day. That's kind of, that is really key to a lot of things. But, I was a very stressed kid, and I was a massive worrier, and I still am to this day.
Yeah.
But that would eat into all sorts of things. Going, if I missed the bus, it would be the worst thing in the world. Literally, it'd be like, there's another bus coming in 2 minutes. It doesn't matter, but that would set me off,
right?
Like fully set me off. And in later life as well, I have major anxiety. I have had my own doubts of obviously depression and things like that, and I've had to deal with those. But it does sink in. It sinks into everything. But I think being able to identify it is so important, and being able to sort of take a little bit of a backtrack and almost kind of forgive yourself a little bit, and it's fine, it's okay, and just be kind to yourself in those moments, because I don't think we do that enough at all. So
there's a bit of a cliche catchphrase in recovery, which I think is so true, particularly listening to you, that addiction is like a roller coaster, and that sooner or later the whole family are on the same ride. And it really seems like that. But I now want to really focus on your recovery and your self-love, really. That moment at 18, as heartbreaking as it is, it feels like a marker in the sand that Sammy's going to take care of Sammy no matter what. So obviously now we go to the rock bottom moment and the tragic passing of your mum. I just wanted to ask you about your relationship with alcohol now, because I'm sort of imagining in that 10-year period up until your mum passing away that you're sort of partying and drinking every night and trying to deal with it. What does that journey with alcohol look like? You mentioned drinking at 14.
Yeah. I mean, I did not have a healthy relationship with alcohol at all. And I think, again, that's down to learnt behaviour. So I very much thought that alcohol was the need and end for every celebration or any outing, anything you're doing, you have to have alcohol because that's the way it is. I very much was introduced to alcohol pops when, between 12 and 14, it was just a thing to have. Where I was growing up, we were very big on house parties. So, and we all had, the older brother or sister who could, go and get us whatever we wanted. Or like me, I had a mum who was quite happy to, supply. Or, I just take it out the cupboard because I knew where it was. So I was very much like, well, yeah, we're drinking because we're supposed to. This is very normal. But it meant that I had no idea that I was supposed to have a limit and would just get blackout drunk a lot. And I wasn't a very nice drunk. I was either incredibly emotional and just crying, or was just really horrible. I didn't like that version of me in any aspect, but I thought it was very normal. And when I went to university, again, I very much thought it was normal. Like, I remember my first weekend was over my birthday, so we were just buying crates and crates and crates of beer, and I was just like, yeah, this is uni life, isn't it? So we just do what we need to do. And it was only when there was one point before Mum passed away when I started to notice I think I had a problem, was when I'd started dating somebody who was alcohol dependent.
Right.
And my friends around me at the time who hadn't, my let's say my new uni friends who hadn't been around previously, who didn't really know my backstory with my mum, were kind of saying to me, Sammy, it's a little bit too much, because they loved me, they knew that it wasn't quite right, something wasn't fitting. But I was like, well, no, I know this is fine because I've been brought up around this. I can deal with it.
And it's familiar.
And it's familiar. But I couldn't deal with it. And I had somebody who knew my mum and who had a relationship with me, who basically said, just be careful because you don't want to turn out like your mum. And it hit a nerve. It was a horrible thing. It hit a really horrible nerve. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like, one, they shouldn't have said that to me. But two, it did kind of trigger something in my brain. I was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? I need to figure this out. But then obviously later on, you know, getting to 27, 28, had my last kind of drinking night out, which was my birthday before I found out mum was ill. Had the night of my life. It was brilliant. But then when I went to go see mum, it basically switched in my head that this is a poison. And I was like, what the hell have I been doing to myself? Why was I ever touching this in the first place? And basically would never touch it. I couldn't touch it again. But in those first couple of years of being sober and not touching it, my thought process around alcohol was incredibly negative in terms of anger. So because if I just witnessed someone die through using alcohol to a very high extent, but I felt that everyone around me who was using it, you know, maybe 1 pint a week, or, you know, who had a drink around me, I thought was being disrespectful.
Right.
And that was through my own grief. Like, you know, I just witnessed something. So I thought everyone around me that was having a nice time, you know, at the pub or whatever, or we go at a party or whatever, I was just like, how dare you? How dare you do this? And how dare you do it in front of me? So I had to kind of almost, again, go on a bit of a journey in terms of understanding alcohol itself. And that is where I kind of went into my creative mind, and I made the film, and I joined Alcohol Change, and I, you know, all these kind of things that actually was just really more education. And like, my friends and my family around me are amazing. They're very aware that especially at the beginning, that I just didn't want it anywhere near me. I didn't want to see it. I just had to remove myself. But actually, it was just learning boundaries, and it was just understanding it in that aspect, and that calmed. The anger calmed and the grief calmed, and that was kind of all weirdly linked. But it was really interesting to kind of go through that, from being a big party goer and, you know, drinking all the time, to literally going, I couldn't even go to a supermarket and go down an alcohol aisle, right? Because I found it it was a massive trigger. It was generally a massive trigger. And I used to get angry at, like, going into Morrison's and being like, how dare they put the alcohol aisle like here? Like, why is it right near the tills? My partner was like, shut up, it's always been there. I was like, yeah, but why is it here? And
you're hyper aware of it.
Hyper aware. But it literally, like you were saying before about roller coasters and things, I just had to kind of get over that hump of learning more about it.
Journey almost seems two-pronged in the sense that, one, it was kind of a revolting feeling towards alcohol because of what I'd done to your mum.
Yeah.
But also, I suspect, a fear that it could develop into alcoholism as well.
100%.
Which I think deserves a big round of applause, because it sounds like it hadn't got there yet. So you had the foresight to see, actually, this is going down a dark road, and if I don't nip it in the bud, this could be serious. I think you should be applauded for that. Not a lot of people have the hindsight to do that.
I think it's something I'm always going to be aware of, and I think it's just always going to be in the back of my mind. Not that, you know, if I did decide to have a pint tomorrow, I don't think it, you know, would necessarily go down that route, but I think it's just something that will always be in my head. And I think my outward look on alcohol is obviously a lot more positive than it was, but I think, you know, education is so important, and I think, you know, I will never be, you know, tell other people not to drink around me, because, you know, that's their own thing to do, but I think just having the knowledge is incredibly important. You know, and I'm happy to share that with people. You know, if they're like, oh, what are the statistics? I'll be like, hang on a minute. Let me get my book out. But I think that's good. I think, you know, being educated and making your own decisions in that way is really cool. And I think that's the way to go with it. And
you got sober relatively young, really. About 20, you were actually 28, right?
28, yeah.
And what was that like, particularly, well, now as well, but sort of while you were still in your 20s? I'm just having a Diet Coke or something.
Yeah, it was challenging to begin with. And I think, again, it was linked to my anger with it, partly. So, you know, I'd be going to like networking events for work, and, you know, you basically get sort of shoved a drink in your hand. That's
Yeah.
basically what it was. And I'd be like, oh no, can I have a soft drink? And they're like, wait, we don't do soft drinks. And I'm like, can I just I'll have a water then? And they're like, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, I just don't want one. And then I, ended up getting into conversations with people going, do you really want to know the truth? Like, I can tell you the truth if you really want to know. And I remember going to a games event, and we were all sat outside because, again, all the networking was happening in the pubs. And, again, I was just having a Coke, and there was probably about 10 people around me, and they were like, Sammy, why aren't you drinking? We don't understand. And I literally went, right, I'm going to tell you a story. And they were like, okay, told them. And it was just obviously silent for a while. But then it was like, okay, let's actually talk about this, because we don't talk about this.
Yeah.
And it was really lovely, because obviously it's people that get me anyway. But it was nice to be able to sort of get their acceptance of it a little bit, and not force it upon me. Because I did feel like it was very much, people were like, well, you need to be drinking because we're at this networking event, and, this is normal. This is very normal. And I think also there's like that weird kind of confidence thing, isn't it? When you're out and about, having something to hold.
For sure.
Is kind of makes you feel better about it.
This kind of obsession with alcohol seems to be slowly getting eroded in the UK with the younger generations coming 100%. On. They were just kind of looking at the data, and they're looking at the positive effects of alcohol on any metric, and just going, actually, it has a negative impact on nearly every metric, apart from maybe in the moment with social anxiety.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
The after effects are so great. And a bit like you, I'm not anti-alcohol at all. I'm not really anti anything. I'm just pro-happiness.
Yeah.
But, it's about people making changes because they want to do it, not because society says it's wrong or there should be some kind of judgment. And I do think it's being eroded now, where you're going out. I'm noticing it within the industry now, that there's like maybe sparkling elderflower going around at a function, and then champagne, and like sometimes half the room or more are drinking the elderflower. I'm like, what's going on?
Yeah, it's lovely. I really enjoy it.
Which is a really lovely thing. I think 0% Guinness is potentially going to outsell Guinness soon. I've just read an article. I mean, it's a great time to be sober, actually, and I'm glad I'm alive to see it. I just want to ask you as well, as an adult, you generously shared about going through some therapy as well. Found some interesting information around particular kind of, for want of a better phrase, hangovers from being the child of an alcoholic as an adult. And some of these might not apply, but I just wondered, there can be a tendency, for example, as an adult, to guess what normal behaviour is. Does that ring any bells?
It does ring a bell. Yeah. Guessing what normal behaviours are. Because you're not brought up in particularly normal behaviours, so you, again, like sort of stepping on eggshells and things, you almost are like hyper aware of everybody else around you. You could link that to mirroring as well. I'm very good at mirroring people. I had it in therapy as well, so I used to, when my therapist would lean forward, so would I. And I'd want to ask her questions, and she was like, that's not how it works. And I was like, oh, sorry. I think that's a big one, actually.
But you know what? You put a boundary in with that. And then it's almost a superpower. Once you understand it, because actually your ability to have synergy with energy and to, mirroring can sound quite negative, but if it's about being hyper aware and emotionally aware of people's frequency and energy and vibrations, it can make you a very kind of, for want of another better phrase, immersive personality. I've been told that I'm quite empathetic with a lot as well. So I think that also comes into those. But I just like, it's one of those things where you just kind of, you read the room a little bit more than normal. And you're just sort of, hyper, making sure that everybody, there are certain things that you need to pick up on. And I have that in all aspects. And actually it does work well in terms of like work things. If I'm on a Zoom call and I'm having maybe a difficult conversation, and I'm just trying to read it a little bit better and trying to kind of make sure that what I'm presenting is comfortable, or what why are they presenting in a certain way, you kind of just pick up on those things. So again, back to people pleasing, things like that. So but that's a really good one. That's a really interesting. Yeah, really interesting. One is, and again, I don't know why this would be a hangover from your environment as a child, but one is having difficulty following a project through from beginning to end.
Focus. Yeah, that's a big one. I guess I would probably link that to, for me personally, maybe having too many projects going on at once.
Right.
Especially with the kind of work that I do, it is very project led, and I would like to do a million things at once.
As a child, I'm guessing you were multitasking.
You were multitasking,
making sure your siblings are okay. There was another interview who said you were checking on your siblings and your mum.
Yeah, so you're always doing multiple things. So that actually links really well. And if I could. I mean, the amount of times I have tried to monetize an idea just through getting like a hobby and going, oh my gosh, that'd be amazing. Actually, let's do this. And then it just drops off.
Yeah.
Like it's very common for me. I mean, there's been a few projects I have managed to get through to the end, which I'm very proud of. But I've got so many ideas that are on the back burner. Like I tried to write a book like 5 years ago, and that just kind of ended up in the drafts.
Right.
But it's, again, with that kind of stuff, the way of kind of getting through it was almost telling people I was doing something or involving people that would help me get to the end.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very much like similar to making the film, was that I needed people around me that were going to help me get to it. Because I remember having the initial conversations with few people in the industry, and I was like, oh, it's just an idea. I don't really know if I should do it. And they were like, no, we're doing it. Let's just get it done. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, okay, let's just do it then. And they were like, yes, there's no reason why we don't need to finish it.
Right.
Which I think was kind of key. But again, it's just, surrounding yourself with the kind of right people to help you get through.
It's amazing as well, because once you're aware of what makes you tick, you can then turn it into a superpower, and even reject those behaviors and do new ones.
Exactly.
You know, it's about having the awareness, isn't it?
Yeah,
of
100%.
it. Because with my sort of past, alcohol journey as well, that comes with a lot of kind of stuff that can affect me in the moment. But as long as I'm aware of it and I've got tools around it, actually it can be a superpower, which I think is really, really an incredible thing. This one I found really interesting. They can be extremely loyal, even in the face of evidence that the loyalty is undeserved.
Oh, yes. Oh my gosh.
Right.
I'm far too loyal.
Right.
I've been incredibly loyal to career situations. So say, for example, if I've had a project or worked with a client that actually that client isn't treating me very well, but I'm so loyal to the project in itself, I would rather finish it or get it done or work on it for years and years and years, even though I know it's negatively impacting me. Yeah. And I've done that many a times.
And that makes sense, because you were always loyal to your mum when you were younger, regardless of her behaviour.
Yeah, 100%.
That makes complete sense as well. Super responsible or super irresponsible?
I'm probably super responsible, which probably makes me quite boring in some circumstances. I've had worked on things where people were just like, oh, it's okay, Sammy's here, she's the mum, so she's going to figure it out. And I'm like, oh my God.
That nickname you get given. I mean, you are a real mum.
Yeah, I'm a real mum now. But I did. Many times I've like walked into a room and people go, oh, mum's here. And I'm like, oh God. I'm like, that's awful to say. But again, that's just me trying to make sure that everything is working and doing what it's supposed to be doing. And I just want everything to be cool.
It's part of the show where I'm going to try something out, because this is very exciting. I've got a little feature on YouTube now where I can put a little subscribe thing. I think it's up there on that side. So if you're watching this now, there's a place to subscribe. Please do that. It really helps me. And if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple, please hit follow and leave a review. Right, now back to the conversation. Your VR film, which was a letter to your mum.
Yeah.
What did you say in that letter? I don't expect you to read it back to me verbatim, but what was your main intention with that letter? What were you trying to say? So
initially with the letter, obviously it was supposed to be sort of written to her just to say hi, talk about circumstances that we had been in during my youth, and also talk about really weird mundane things like beans on toast, like generally just, do you still like eating beans on toast on a Saturday? That kind of thing. But it also, in the way that I presented that letter, it was through so many different moments of grief. So I talked about things like waiting for a phone call, so which was linked to the initial phone call of her passing away or finding out that she was ill, because I think I always knew that eventually I was going to get a phone call. I just didn't want to accept it. I also looked at the emotions and feelings around being a COA. So I talked about the sounds of like bottles clinking in a plastic bag, things like jangling my keys, like taking a little bit longer to open the front door after being at college because I didn't want to know what was behind that door, but almost just sort of sharing all that with her because I didn't know if she was aware or if she was ever aware of how that felt for me. And I think it was just important to kind of get it out and then sort of heal a little bit from it. And the thing with that letter as well is that it doesn't actually allude to a lot of intimate experiences, but I think that when you watch it, you do kind of, your own imagination can go to points. So it's not gruesome in any way. It's not, I don't think it's necessarily, it doesn't share too much. Yeah. But I think if you are somebody who's in my position, you could probably put your own points to it and your own stories to it, which I hope that would kind of help you not feel alone in that circumstance.
Yeah. We'll put a link to the VR film, if that's all right, in the show notes. So go and check that out now.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Obviously, the film for you, which is a beautiful thing, using your creativity as a way to heal, which I guess was for yourself, so that you would heal. But your film, not just your film, but all of the work that you do now with Alcohol Change UK and everything else, who is it for more, do you think? I would assume it's partly for yourself. I know a lot of my recovery work, when I help others, I'm helping myself. I'm just guessing. Yeah. Are you trying to reach people who are in the same boat as you, other children of alcoholics? Or are you reaching out as well to people in active addiction? And are you saying to them, get into recovery, otherwise this will happen? Who's your main sort of target, do you think?
I think it's probably a mix. Again, where I said before about sort of when I stopped drinking, I was very angry. I think a lot of it in the beginning was anger towards my mum, actually, which I'm happy to say because I think that's, again, a part of grief. Anger is a big part of it. So it was almost like deep diving into something where I thought that everything I was doing was a way of helping her in another life. It sounds a bit weird, but helping another mum or helping somebody else's parent. So it sounds a bit strange, but I thought if I could educate myself, do all these things, learn as much as I can, share this story, then somebody else in my position could take that to a parent or could, maybe take it to a sibling or something like that. Yeah. But then I have obviously realised over time that a lot of it has been personally for me in sort of letting go of things and recovering. Yeah. The film itself was obviously such a big thing to do. I still really don't know how I did it because I did it literally straight after she passed away. So it was released in March of 2019 and she died in October. And so I think that was my creative brain going, you need to do something and you need to do it now because otherwise I never would have done it. And
you got a big outpouring of other COAs, I think, who were saying, wow, I'm going through this as well. That must have been quite overwhelming.
Incredibly,
and also amazing and powerful. Yeah. Just briefly, I'm just aware that George might kick us out of the studio shortly. Thanks, George. In terms of you're a clear support for other COAs, that's obvious. But in terms of boundaries, like how have you had to put boundaries in? Because I know this firsthand working in the space that I have to be quite boundaried. Otherwise, I'll just spend 24 hours a day helping other people. Yeah.
It took me a while to kind of put the boundaries into place because I think in the beginning you do just want to do as much as possible. Yeah. You want to help everybody. You want to speak to everybody and anyone that's coming to you because you don't want to feel like you felt when you were that age. You don't want anyone to feel like they're not being spoken to, especially having that confidence to go up to somebody and go, hey, by the way, I saw your film. Can we have a conversation? Because that is incredibly brave in any aspect to want to have an open conversation. But it does mean that you're opening yourself up to everybody and their pain. And you, as a human being, you can only take on so much. And I found that doing the events and films was brilliant, but I did have to sometimes give myself time in between just to to kind of take on everyone else's pain and do what I needed to do to sort of go, right, okay, that's awful. I'm so sorry. I understand. Let me just go and process it over here so that you can have all the right kind of information and have Sammy who is helpful, not Sammy who is going, oh my gosh, I'm incredibly overwhelmed and I don't know how to deal with this.
Yeah. You put that kind of marker in the sand at 18, didn't you?
Yes.
Sounds like that's something that, my gosh, did you have to learn in that moment that you can always fall back on?
Yeah.
100%. That you're able to do that.
Yeah.
We're going to put some links in the show notes about places where COAs can get some further support.
Yeah, definitely.
You've been very generous with the links, so I'm going to put those in.
Amazing.
I wondered if I could just end on this, and this is potentially quite difficult. Mm-hmm. There's a big recovery community that listen and watch this podcast. There'll be some people that are in recovery themselves, and I think there'll also be a lot of people that are still drinking or using. I wondered if specifically you could talk to them. I want you to imagine that there's a mum listening or watching this now who's thinking about getting into recovery, who maybe is identifying as your mum in this narrative. Mm-hmm. Specifically to them, because I think your words will be incredibly powerful and they will be heard. What would you say to them?
I would say, whatever situation you are currently in, to first forgive yourself. And I know how hard it is to be in that situation, but I also know how hard it is for the people around you. But that does not mean that they do not want to support you, because they will be there to the end. If I could have done everything and anything for my mum, I would have done. But I think it's just find that one person who will help you. And it doesn't matter what you have to say to them. Write them a letter, do a drawing, do whatever you need to do. But they will be there for you. Yeah. And I think just give yourself credit and be a little bit brave.
Absolutely. Wow, won't it be worth it?
Yes. 100%.
And you won't have to have that awful moment in the hospital that you had to endure.
Yeah.
I know it's going to sound like I'm kind of going in hard there, but, a lot of stuff in the rehab, I'm obviously doing this. I'm often working with adults that are, in a positive space because they're in rehab, just like maybe a listener or a watcher of this, that they're tuning into this for a particular reason, maybe looking for change. And there's often a bit of a cliche in recovery that, you get sober or clean, you have to do it for yourself. And of course, that is true. But I always bang on about, but you do have responsibilities to other people. Other people in your life are affected by this illness. And even though you're not responsible for your illness, you are responsible for your recovery. And that's what I'm all about. And I just want everyone who's listening or watching this, hearing Sammy's story, who's maybe in that space, to please, like you say, be brave and throw yourself into recovery, because not only will you benefit, but all your loved ones are going to immediately benefit. And, I just think, wow, what an amazing spokesperson you are to get that message across.
Thanks.
So really huge thanks for coming down today.
No, thank you for inviting me. This is incredible. It's such an important conversation, and I'm very, very honoured to be here. Oh,
it's an absolute pleasure. We worked together a few years ago, and we had a blast, didn't we, doing some VR stuff?
Yeah, cool VR stuff.
I know, and I'm so impressed that you came down, being a new mum. Probably have had no sleep, looking all fresh.
Ooh, I don't feel fresh, but
well, you look and sound fresh, which is brilliant. Thanks again, Sammy. I really appreciate it. And guys, thanks so much for watching and tuning in. As I've banged on about already, if you're on YouTube, hit subscribe, leave me a comment, join the ever-growing community. Spotify, Apple. What's Apple? Spotify, Apple. That was weird. Spotify and Apple, 5 stars really helps me. And hitting follow. Share this episode with anyone that you think this might help. And as promised, and I've not let you down yet, I will see you in 2 weeks' time. Until then, look after yourself, and thanks for watching or listening.